Okay guys, Timmy coming at you again, and today I'm going to review for you the concepts of isotonic, hypotonic, and hypertonic solutions. So when you discuss hypo, or hypertonic solutions, what you're really doing is you're referring essentially to the plasma of the blood, the watery part of blood. And it's made in comparison to the fluid that a red blood cell bathes in. So here you got a red blood cell. And you have the plasma, the watery part of the blood. So again, the goal of the body is to maintain homeostasis. So you got stuff in the blood, yep, and you have stuff inside a red blood cell. Again, it don't make no never mind the stuff, as long as the ratio of stuff to water in the plasma is equal to the stuff and water inside a red blood cell. So another way of saying that is when the osmolarity of the red blood cell is equal to the osmolarity of the plasma, because that's what the red blood cell floats in. When that's equal, then you have what's called an isotonic solution. So when the plasma is isotonic to the cytoplasm of a red blood cell or a cell in the body, you have an isotonic solution, and that's a good thing. So remember, always remember that if stuff can't move, water can always move. So here you have a situation where you have an isotonic solution. So the plasma is isotonic to red blood cell. That doesn't mean that water doesn't move. What that means is that when a water molecule from the plasma enters the red blood cell, at the exact same time, a water molecule from the red blood cell enters the plasma. So that's a dynamic equilibrium. But your goal is to have an isotonic solution. So if that doesn't happen, then water will begin to shift. And if water begins to shift, bad things can happen. So isotonic solution, plasma, is typically 0.9% sodium chloride or normal saline. So normal saline is isotonic. That's why when people are in the hospital, if they can't take anything through their mouth, right? They can't drink or eat. They're still losing fluid. They're peeing, sweating, right? You lose fluid through breathing. So you have to maintain their blood volume. So what do? You start an IV and you give them normal saline. So that's why if you look on the IV bag in the hospital, it will say 0.9% sodium chloride or normal saline. Now, some people, if they can't drink or eat, And it's going to be a while before they drink or eat. That can lower their blood sugar. You don't want that. So sometimes they will put a 5% dextrose solution in 0.9% sodium chloride. So you will get what's called D5 and saline. And that is 5% dextrose, which is a synthetic glucose essentially, and that will keep their blood sugar up. So that's isotonic. Hypotonic, again, you're always referring to the fluid that a red blood cell bathes in. So you got your capillary, you got your red blood cell, and then you have stuff, again, don't never mind, inside the red blood cell. But in a hypotonic solution, we're talking about the plasma. Again, the osmolarity of the plasma is lower than the osmolarity of a red blood cell. Now, on your quiz, many of you stated that. What I didn't want, well, what I really wanted was, if this is the case, where does water move and why? So remember, if stuff can't move, water can always move. And water always moves from an area of a lot of water and less stuff through a selectively permeable membrane to an area of more stuff and less water. So water will move from the plasma into the red blood cell, and that will pump up the volume of a red blood cell because you're adding water to it. And if enough water is added to that red blood cell, the red blood cell bursts or hemolyzes. And you don't want that. You need those red blood cells. Another way of looking at it is the plasma, because it's hypotonic, has a lower osmolarity than the red blood cell. So the osmolarity, or stuff over water, in the plasma is lower than the osmolarity inside a red blood cell. So the red blood cell has a higher osmolarity. And water always moves from an area of low osmolarity to high osmolarity. There's two ways you could have stated that. But what you did is, and what I wanted was, I wanted you to complete your thought. Many of you said, well, the hypotonic solution will cause water to move into the red blood cell and will cause it to burst. What I wanted to know was why that happens. So the opposite of hypotonic is hypertonic. So again, you have the capillary, you got the red blood cell. So in this case, the amount of stuff to water, or the osmolarity of the plasma, is greater than the osmolarity inside a red blood cell. So in this case, we have high osmolarity in plasma, and you have low osmolarity in a red blood cell. So in this case, where does water always go? Water always moves from an area of a lot of water and less stuff through a selectively permeable membrane to an area of more stuff and less water. So water will move out of the red blood cell into the plasma to try to balance that ratio of stuff to water in the blood and stuff to water in the cell. Well, if that happens, the red blood cell slowly begins to shrivel up. And the medical term for a shriveling up red blood cell is called crenation. So that's what happens. So neither one of these, hypotonic, hypertonic, are good for the body. What you want is isotonic. But there are some situations that will cause you to have to give an IV of either hypo or hypertonic solution. So let's look at that. One of the questions that I gave you was, why is low sodium bad for you? So here you have a capillary, and here you have a brain cell. Now, a couple of things. The brain is encased in the skull. So the ability of the brain to expand, even a little bit, is not good. The second thing is that the brain has no lymphatic system, and the lymphatic system can drain off excess fluid that has escaped the cardiovascular system and bring it back to the heart. So the brain, central nervous system being encased in the skull and spinal column, and the fact that it doesn't have a lymphatic system makes the brain, central nervous system, especially susceptible to fluid shifts, and bad things can happen. So remember that sodium, because it's highly concentrated in the blood, and our big buddy, Big Al, albumin, is in the blood. And because it's so big, it's always found in the blood in normal physiology. Potassium is highly concentrated in the cell. So what I'm saying to you in this drawing is this, is the osmolarity of the blood, the capillary, is equal to the osmolarity inside a cell. That's a good thing. So what happens if a person has low sodium? Well, if their sodium level begins to drop, what you have done is you have created a situation where the blood is hypotonic. The plasma is hypotonic, right? It has a low osmolarity. And relative to the capillary, the cell has a high osmolarity. So if stuff can't move, water can always move. Potassium is continually getting pumped in the cells, so in essence, potassium can't move. So if stuff can't move, what can always move? Water. And water always moves from an area of low osmolarity, or a lot of water and less stuff, through a selectively permeable membrane to an area of high osmolarity, or an area of a lot of stuff and less water. So water will move from the blood into the brain cells, and water will begin to accumulate. Now, normally what happens is the lymphatic system can drain that off, but the central nervous system doesn't have a lymphatic system, and it's encased in the skull. So if this situation continues, more and more water is going to go into the brain. And as that pressure builds up, it will squish the arteries that supply your brain, and you won't get any blood flow to your brain. And that's devastating. So that can lead to seizure, coma, death. Bad. So in a situation like that, what do you want to do? You want to pull out the water from the brain cells. So if you give them an isotonic solution, right? If you give them a solution, an IV solution that is equal to the osmolarity inside the brain cell, then you will prevent water, further water from shifting into the brain cells. Well, that's not good. What you want to do is you want to get the water off. So in that situation, you want to give them a hypertonic solution. So you want to give them a solution that has a greater osmolarity than inside the cell. That's hypertonic. So in this case, where's water going to move? Well, water moves always from an area of low osmolarity to an area of high osmolarity. Or water moves always from an area of a lot of water and less stuff to an area of more stuff and less water. So water will be drawn out of the brain cells by the osmotic effect of that extra sodium in the blood. So they will give, instead of a 0.9%, they will give upwards of a 3% sodium chloride solution, which is hypertonic, to draw off that water that accumulated in those brain cells. Now, let's look at a situation where you may want to give a hypotonic solution. One of those situations we talked about is in a situation where your blood sugar is very high. So remember, you got, if your blood sugar is say 600, right? Right? So you got, what up, G? So you got glucose in the blood. And if your blood sugar is 600, that means you ain't got insulin. What else you got in the blood? Well, you got sodium, and you got big L, albumin. Well, because glucose can't go from the blood into the cell, right? Doesn't matter what cell it is because your blood sugar is high all over. Potassium's in the cell. So what has happened now, if glucose can't move because you don't have insulin, water can always move. So in this case, water is going to be drawn out of the cells by the osmotic effect of that extra glucose. And because water always moves from an area of low osmolarity to an area of high osmolarity, water is going to get sucked out of all the cells. So all of your cells will be dehydrated. So if a person comes in and their blood sugar has been elevated for a while, then their cells are going to be dehydrated. So the first thing you want to do is you want to start giving them some insulin, right? To get that blood sugar back. So once you've got your blood sugar under control, big L, sodium, glucose, right? You have to rehydrate those cells. So in this case, you want to try to get water back into the cells. You don't want to draw the water out. So you want to give them a solution, an IV solution that is hypotonic. to the cell. So what they will do is they will start an IV and give you 0.45% sodium chloride, which is half normal saline. So once you get your blood sugar in check, the blood sugar is going down, and this doesn't happen dramatically. Your blood sugar is back to normal, right? So you sucked out all the water, so the osmolarity inside your cells is low. If you give them a hypotonic solution, IV solution, it's going to cause the water to move from an area of a lot of water and less stuff to an area of more stuff and less water. That will rehydrate the cells. So when you get into your clinicals, they're going to be talking about different IV solutions that are used, and this is the reason why they use different IV solutions, because you want to replenish the water in the cells, or in the case where your sodium levels are low, you want to draw the water out of your cells. So I hope that helped, but remember, always remember, if stuff can't move, water can always move, and water always moves from an area of a lot of water and less stuff, or low osmolarity, through a selectively permeable membrane to an area of more stuff and less water, or an area of high osmolarity. Hope it helped, and I'll post this shortly. Thanks.